It's social distancing at the chamber. It's a post-Labor Day edition of a little segment we call Happy Hour with Hammer. As always, joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor. Hey, Glenn, how are you?
Great to see you. All's well. How are you, Garrick?
Well, we're doing all right, and even better because we have a special guest tonight from south of the Gila. We head down to the Old Pueblo. Glenn, why don't you introduce our special guest?
Thank you, Garrick. We're thrilled today to have Amber Smith, the president and CEO of the Tucson Metro Chamber, founded in 1896. For those keeping score, that's before Arizona was actually a state. The Tucson Metro Chamber is a membership-based business advocacy and community development organization that represents about 1,500 businesses employing more than 160,000 Arizonans in Tucson and Pima County. And Amber is considered one of the great voices, one of the great leaders when it comes to business development, job creation, and she's done an incredible amount in workforce development. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Glenn, for having me. Hey, Garrick.
Hey.
Amber, the Tucson Metro Chamber recently announced its opposition to Proposition 208, which, as we all know, would increase the state's top marginal income tax rate by 77.7%. Why did you and your board and your organization decide to take this position?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Right now, especially as a time when businesses simply cannot afford to take on any more expenses. And secondarily, propositions largely are not a good way to legislate. And it could put us in a more painful financial position in the future with zero flexibility.
One of our contentions is that because of the way our tax code works, so many businesses pay essentially under the individual income tax part of our tax code. We know that this really wallops our small businesses. Could you give me a sense within your membership of the impact and some of the feedback that you're receiving?
Yeah, absolutely. Tucson in general is a small business town. More than 85% of our businesses are classified as small businesses. And so when you look at it just from that perspective, the number of businesses that would be impacted that are truly that mom and pop with that pass through, P&L that does impact their personal taxes, it's a very big deal. I mean, it is absolutely the one critical change that could flip their business upside down.
One of the things that we've been talking about is that we're, before the show, we were talking about different schooling situations. We're talking about that because we're still in a pandemic situation. And a lot of our smaller businesses in particular have been hard hit. And we've been fortunate. We've all worked hard to make sure that there's federal Paycheck Protection Program money. But can you maybe talk a little bit about that as we're trying to get the economy back to pre-pandemic levels, the challenges that this initiative would put in front of that common goal?
Well, I think we have to first look at the pandemic and how critical the PPP was. That was the absolute lifeline to those businesses to sustain. Without it, our unemployment rate and number of business closures would have far exceeded today's numbers. However, we're now at that point where the PPPs running out. We only have a few more months that some businesses can use. So we really do not even have a good sense of where businesses are because they have had this crutch to try to allow them to get through this pandemic. So the impact that we are seeing is already catastrophic when we have this crutch. So let alone adding another burden like that would be nearly impossible to absorb. And it's an absolute myth for people to say that these small businesses are wealthy and are really just trying to skirt the tax laws, because it's not the case. You know, if they are putting their blood, sweat, tears, and personal investment of themselves, friends and family, etc., into these businesses to get them to succeed because they are passionate about it, not because they're becoming millionaires from it.
Well said. Garrick, any questions?
Amber, I'm just curious. It's not always easy for even business advocacy groups to come out and take a stance on a ballot initiative. Can you just tell me what it was like inside the chamber, and in your position as a business leader, to have to put yourself out there publicly and say that this is the wrong move?
Well, there was very strong consensus that the choice we made was the right one. And really what I should have started the conversation with is that education and workforce development is absolutely one of our core priorities. We know that everything from early childcare, quality early childcare education is as much of a workforce development education issue as community college and university funding, everything in between. And so we are strong proponents about adequately, and not just adequately, but increased funding into all of that across the board.
Yeah.
The proposition is not the way to achieve it. And that was the general consensus is you know what, we want there to be higher funding for education. We want our legislators to add to that. We want metrics in place, but we simply are uncomfortable getting there through this mechanism that ultimately could be far more detrimental to what is that size of that pie, that revenue pie. And I think that was really the critical factor is our businesses are what generate such a significant portion of revenue that then allows funding into education. And so if we reduce what that revenue looks like, you're still negatively impacting education in the longer term.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, something that Glenn and I have talked about in these segments is that for all that this proposition claims to do in the space of K-12, when you pull back and look at the educational continuum, it does nothing for early childhood. If you're in the higher education space, watch out. This really doesn't do anything for you, whether at community colleges or universities. And Amber, something you referenced earlier, because of the constraints that it puts on future budgets, those parts of the education picture, they could be up for cuts sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Glenn, why don't you take us home?
Well, Amber, we really appreciate your voice, the powerful voice of the Tucson Metro Chamber. We agree with all of your comments. We all support additional funding for our entire educational system, including the great University of Arizona and Pima Community College, as well as our teachers in our K-12 system. This is the wrong way to do it, and we need to do everything possible to make sure we have the strongest possible business environment, and particularly our small business entrepreneurial homegrown environment. And I just want to thank you for your great leadership, not just in Southern Arizona, but in the entire state of Arizona.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. All right, Glenn, another episode on the can. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.